It's a game changer. Why all of a sudden is that the phrase that everybody uses for everything in the world? It's a game changer. It's a game changer. You see this new toothbrush? It's a game changer. I hate that expression. But anyway, way back when I first got into watercolor and I wanted to get a little bit serious, and I bought some Lucas Aquarelle colors, and I was like, oh, they're okay. They're okay. They're just not how I wanted my watercolor to act. So I said, let me get a professional brand that I know of that I can pick up off Amazon, and I went and bought the Holbein 18 set. Now for me, these were a game changer because I was using watercolor that acted much differently than the Lucas did. It was a little bit more concentrated, a little bit more vibrant. It glows a little bit when you use it. It is a traditional, well, from what I understand, it's a traditional Japanese watercolor. So some of the colors are a little bit more opaque than some of the other ones. Now, some of them, they say that they're not. This was I went down a rabbit hole here with these because and that's another expression I use all the time. Anyway, as I was on the website, it's hard to get all the information for all of the paints. So you go to their website and you look up their paint, and it'll tell you things like if it's non-staining or granulating or whatever, but they don't tell you everything for every paint. And then it'll tell you a light fast rating is reasonably light fast or good or excellent. So there's only 3 stars that it can have. Most of them are 2 stars, but that's not even the worst part. The worst part is to get the pigment information. You have to go to a different part of the website. There's a sheet that they have, and then you get the pigment information off of that. But off of that site, that part of the website, the pigment information doesn't always match with the light fast rating as the other sheet did when you see the color and they have that light fast. So it's very, and they've come under fire for this before. A lot of people, after I picked it up, of course, I saw a lot of YouTubers that were saying, oh no, you should not use this because it's suspect and you have no idea if they're telling you the truth and all that kind of stuff. Listen, it's not as big of a deal as you may think it is. Most of the stuff, the thing that was most concerning to me was there's some colors that I think are more opaque that they're saying are transparent. So that's the more suspect thing. The other stuff is different, but you can figure out most of the stuff except for the pigment information. That's the one thing you can't test just by swatching it out. But when you paint with things, you can figure out if it's staining, if it's granulating, if it's transparent. You can figure all that out while you're painting. That's not a big deal. So I went and I used these paints, and I just love the result that I got with them. I didn't even know how to use them the right way. I was just starting with really understanding watercolor a little bit better. And you'll see it. The way that I use them now is not the way that I used to use them. I used to use them as just my standard watercolor set, but I use them very differently now because they have a certain quality that I absolutely love. And I continue to use that set. I still have the same set of paints from like 2016 or something like that. And it's the same set, and I just keep using it. And it hasn't gone away yet. And they were the little tubes. They weren't very big, but they filled the pans, and I just used so many other things all the time. It was like once I started going down that hill, you just trip and you start rolling and tumbling down the hill, and you get faster and faster, and there's just no bottom to this hill. So you just keep getting watercolor and testing them and trying them, and by the time you run out of a color, you replace the one color like once every 5 years because you're using all the other things. That's okay, don't worry about that. So I picked up, this was the palette that I picked up from. It has 18, and that was more than that. I only filled 18 of the wells because that's all there is. There's 24 wells in here, but and then up here, you could tell I had no idea what I was doing. Up here, this little strip up here that has all the colors swatched out on it, yeah, that's a piece of Bristol paper because that's what I was using for watercolor because I didn't understand anything about watercolor. I didn't know there was watercolor paper was different. I thought it was just more expensive because it was thicker. I didn't realize that there were qualities to it that make it watercolor paper. So I just used that Bristol paper. That's fine. I was watching other artists use the hot press paper, and I thought it was the same thing. Don't worry, that was my problem. I had to deal with that. But the colors are still on it. It's okay. You can paint on anything. It's just that whether it's meant for it or not. So today I'm going to swatch these out, and I'm going to do a painting with them and show you how I use them. All right, let's get into it. Okay, now I put these lines, I usually don't do this with the lines here, but I did put the lines here because I wanted to see, some of them say that they're transparent, and I don't think they are. When I mix them with other colors, it makes that color very opaque, so I don't believe that when they say that they're transparent. I don't think that they are, and we're gonna test that today. Now I use these colors to mix a lot, so I wanna see if I can make, especially these yellows, they get tainted very easily, but I'm going to try and do the best that I can here. So this here is the permanent lemon yellow, and from what I see, I think now that some of the ink may come off a little bit too, so don't look at that. That's not a determining factor of the paint. That's just what it is. So to me that looks a little bit opaque, and it says that it's completely transparent. So I'm going to tell you what I see versus what they say. I may be entirely wrong, but I don't think so. I think I'm doing pretty good here. So let's get a little dot here of the color, and it doesn't move. And from the most part, from what I remember, these paints always stay put. The Holbein paints stay right where you put them. It doesn't mean there's fillers. It doesn't mean there's anything. It just means that there's less mover inside the formula. So a lot of companies use ox gold. I know Core uses synthetic ox gold. I don't know if any other companies do, but that makes it move through the water. And if they don't put it in there, it doesn't move through the water. So that's just how it is. Now the PY3 is the Hansa Yellow, just like the Daniel Smith version. Hansa Yellow Light uses that same pigment. And then the PY74 is the Aralide Yellow, and I don't even know what that is. It is in a lot of different paint formulas. Some of them they call it cadmium, or they call it an Indian yellow or a Japanese yellow or something like that. But this is that yellow. It's a bright lemon yellow, just like it says, permanent yellow lemon. And it is supposed to be a 2 in the light fast, which is good. It's supposed to be transparent, non-staining, non-granulating. I think that's semi-opaque or semi-transparent, however you want to look at that. It's the same thing, but I think that's basically what I'm looking at here. Next, look at the permanent yellow deep, and this one, same thing. It kind of, you could see it covers over. If they say it's transparent, it covers right over that line. So it's at least semi-opaque, if anything. And the way that I found this out with these paints is because I used to draw comic characters, and while I was drawing the comic characters, I would do all the line work and then go in after and put some paint, and that's what happened. It would cover over, and I'd say, well, wait, that's kind of weird. It's supposed to be transparent watercolor, and it's covering over. And then someone said, oh, that's because it's not really. They put fillers in there and all this other stuff. I don't believe that they do, but you never know. I have no idea. I'm not the company, so I have no idea. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying I'm just going to tell you what I see, and then you can let me know what you think. So this contains the Aralide Yellow and the Diaralide Yellow. That's both pigments in this one. It has a 2 for light fast. Says it's transparent. I don't believe it is. Says non-staining and says non-granulating. Next up is the yellow ochre. Not only would I say that that's semi-opaque, I think that's entirely opaque. What do you think about that? It says it's transparent. Unless maybe the chart that I'm looking at is an incomplete chart. That actually moved quite a bit. This one is not moving at all. That could be a characteristic of the pigment as well. Sometimes the pigments move by themselves and some other pigments don't move. So, but this is supposed to be entirely light fast, transparent, semi-opaque. I mean, sorry, not staining, not semi-opaque. I'm saying that's entirely opaque, not transparent, non-staining, non-granulating, and that I'd agree with. But this is definitely an opaque paint. Next, we're going to look at the vermilion hue. Again, opaque or semi-opaque at least. You know, this is just a common thing with the Japanese paints because they don't ground the pigments small enough that, not I say they don't do it small enough, but the traditional way of doing it there, it's not small where it'd be as transparent. So bigger particles sometimes sits on top. That's just what happens. Now this says it is opaque, but I would say this one is more opaque than this one. So it's telling you, yes, opaque. It's a 3-star. It means it's completely light fast. And then it's saying that it's staining and non-granulating. So look, as long as it's finally saying, yeah, okay, this one, yeah, we're saying it's not. I would say it's not for the other ones either. Now this is one of my favorite colors in this whole set. This rose madder here. Just an absolutely beautiful color. I love it. I've used this one in a transparent manner before. So I would give this the transparency. I don't think it really covered that much. If it did, it slightly did. But it is slightly staining. Oh boy, look at that. I just destroyed that. Okay, let me just try that again. I want to try and do this as good as I can with some clean water here. So, but anyway, it says it's semi-staining and that it's non-granulating, and I would agree with that. Okay, this is another beautiful color in this set, and this is the Crimson Lake. I'll go through the pigments here in a second. But this is the Crimson Lake, and again, I think it does cover over here. I think it covers over more than that one did. But, you know, this paint I don't expect to be transparent when I use it through experience. I had the experience before I ever saw these charts, so don't worry about that. It's almost like if that doesn't happen in a video, something's wrong, but don't worry. I've got it taken care of now. Alright, let's get some water here. And there you go. It didn't really move. And that's fine. They don't really move that much, even if they move a little bit. That one moved the most, so let me get over here. This one over here moved the most, but that could be the pigment itself. This is a beautiful color, by the way. Very close to the new Gamboge as far as the things that I like about it. That it gets almost orange, and you can get it right around the edge here. You see how light it can actually get. So that's something that I would like, and that would be my only. I wouldn't use that yellow. I'd only use this yellow. Use it very diluted to get that bright yellow if I needed it, and then a little bit more concentrated to get a little bit more of an orange warm effect, which is great in sunsets, by the way. Okay, so let me go back through these here. I did not talk about any of the pigments here, and I need to do that. POI 42, very traditional yellow iron oxide, and some of them are transparent and some of them are not. So it just depends. It varies widely with whatever brand you're using and how they treat it. So great paint, single pigment, and works well, which does not matter to me, by the way. We'll go into that later, and that's fine. Now the vermilion, we're getting into the Pyrrole Orange, the PO73. Then you hit a Pyrrole Red, so they are very excited about the Pyrrole colors, as they should be. They're very beautiful colors. They're used all the time in watercolor because they are wonderful. They have great light fast rating, and that's what people love about them. They're beautiful, they're bright, they're vibrant, and they're light fast, so you can't go wrong there. And the PY 110 is the, I'm gonna screw this up, isoindolinone yellow, and that's probably not how you say that. Don't worry, it's fine. And here in the Rose Madder we have the famous PR83 Alizarin Crimson. I don't understand that rating of a 3 light fast because alizarin crimson is known to be one of the most fugitive colors anywhere. However, it is also one of the most beautiful colors you could ever use on a palette. It's absolutely stunning. I love this color, and it's probably why I like to use this palette so much, is because of this color. Every time I use this palette, this is the color I use. It's absolutely beautiful. But I would not recommend someone selling anything with this color in it. I don't understand how they say that it is a light fast of 3. The ASTM on this one is usually around a 4 or 5. No, 5. Yeah, 4 or 5, which is the lowest you can get. You wouldn't do that. And they have a lot of alternatives to this color. A lot of different things that they use. People use like PR 177 or 179 or 264. but they're just not the same. They're not identical to this color. So all the old masters use this color right here. And if you want to use this color, go ahead and use it. Put it in your sketchbook. Fill it up in your sketchbook. Just don't sell anything with that color. I don't know where that rating came from. I have no idea. Maybe I should contact them and ask them why. I don't understand it. I don't get it. And this is a good example here of someone trying to copy this color but make it more permanent. And so this is they call it Crimson Lake, because a lot of times this is called alizarin Crimson Lake. That's why they call it that. But it's rose madder in their set. And then here they do the Crimson Lake here, which again, absolutely beautiful color. I love that color. But you're looking at they're still different. They're different shades. You're not going to find this color anywhere else. This is the only place that they can even try and get close to it. And a lot of companies do that. And they're going to use the PR177, which is the anthracnone red, which is something, so I have an anthracnone red. I'll show you. We'll go through some comparisons. But this one, it's still a beautiful color, absolutely wonderful color. It's just not the same as that one. It's not a direct substitute. It's still a nice color to have, though. Then this is the PR122 is a quinacridone magenta, and the PV19 is a quinacridone violet. So those are the colors they're using to try and get this as close to this as they can. It's not exactly the same. Of course, they wouldn't make it exactly the same as that one because you wouldn't do that in a set, but that's okay. You could use that as a substitute of that. So I was going to say you get both of these, you stick this one in your sketchbook and put this one on the finished piece. That's just how that works. This is very light fast. All those pigments are. And this also is transparent, not staining, and non-granulating. Now this mineral violet, it's a nice color. It's just they use some weird pigments for it. It's a little bit weak in tinting strength. Let me see if I get a little bit more concentration on there. It's a little bit weaker in the tinting strength. It's not like the dioxazine violet. It's not like that at all. It might try to be, but it's not. See, this only has a 2 light fast rating. It's supposed to be transparent, and I guess I put it on really thick here. You can't see, but the part that is not really thick where it's that dark, you can see the color, the marker come right through it. It's not a big deal. Transparent, not staining, and it does granulate. So this is a granulation, and part of the reason that it granulates is right there, that PB29, that ultramarine blue. And not my favorite blue, but in a purple it makes sense because it's a blue that leans red. So you want the blue to lean red if you're trying to make a purple, which is a red that leans blue. So that makes perfect sense. It creates a very bright and vibrant purple. Again, we have the PR122, which is the quinacridone magenta. And then we have the PBR25, which is the benzimidazoline brown. And that sometimes leans very red for a brown. It's like a red brown, and a lot of the like the core and things like that, it's like a reddish brown. So, but all very good light fast. I'm not sure, I'm not sure what it is, but it's only a 2 light fast here. It's fine. That's fine. I'll take their word for that one. Now let me see if I can get some granulation out here in the water out spot here and see if it spreads a little bit. It does not. So what I'm going to do is just put a little bit extra here just to see if we can see some granulation. It's not spreading by itself, so let's see if we can do this. You have to make sure it's thin enough where it will. Now I'm not entirely sure, but from what I understand, that PBR25 is extremely staining. So I don't know why this is not not at all staining, and I'm not going to test it here because I don't want to mess up my swatch. But from examples, you'll be able to tell when you're doing it if it does. Now I can see some granulation in here, but not as strong as I would like. We're going to move on here to the Prussian blue, and Prussian blue is a great color. It's a nice dark, deep blue. It is transparent. It's just that it's very dark, so sometimes it can cover a black line, but it's not because it's covering the black line. It's just because it gets so dark that it could appear to be covering the black line, but it's definitely not here. It's a 2 light fastness, and of course the PB27 is the Prussian blue, transparent, semi-staining, and not granulating at all. But still, beautiful color. I've used this for a long time. This is where I was introduced to Prussian blue. I had never used a Prussian blue before until I used it on this palette. And a lot of companies have darker Prussian blues. Maybe that's why I like this one so much. Down here, it looks almost like a phthalo blue to me. Very, very beautiful color down here. I'm not big a fan of the mass tone up here, but the down here, I love the way that it thins out a little bit down here. It's a beautiful color. And we're going to move to the cobalt blue, and this is the first cobalt blue that I ever used. Again, the pigment PB28, that is cobalt blue. Excellent light fastness, transparent, very transparent. I have no problem with that. Non-staining according to this, and very granulating. So I'm going to do the same thing as I did before. First, I'm going to put the dot and see if it'll move in the dot, which it probably will not, or at least it shouldn't. Where am I here? Make sure I grab the right paint. And it doesn't really move. It's the same thing. So let's try and see if we can put some extra in here and get some granulation effect. Let's see how that is. I'll put a little bit more concentration up here and a little bit more water down here. Let's see what happens. If we go over to that violet, you can see, or that, the mineral violet, is actually, you can see some separation in here. You can see some of the blue on the inner part pull out, and some of the pinkish, or not the pinkish, the magenta color on the edges kind of pull out as well. So the blue and the magenta kind of separating from each other in here. Very beautiful paint, very beautiful color. If you use it like this, it looks beautiful. And yes, I can see some granulation up here, quite a bit of granulation. But down here, it's more of a separating color than a granulating color. Up here, yeah, I could see it. So we'll come back to that and see how that looks here in a little bit. Okay, this is the one here that is a little bit suspect. So the compost blue here, we have a 2, but that's only, when I looked up the pigment information, it said light fast 2, and I said conflicting light fastness. If you look on the actual color chart, it says it's only a 1 light fastness. So I'm not sure which one to believe or what it actually is. That says semi-transparent. I would say that that's entirely opaque. That is an opaque pigment if I've ever seen one. And it's because of the PW6. Now here's the thing that's very confusing. Phthalo blue and titanium white. I don't understand. Both have extremely high light fast ratings. PB15 and PW6, extremely high, but this one is either a 1 or a 2 star. I don't get that. I don't understand it, but that's what they're saying. Okay, permanent green 1. That is entirely opaque. Okay, so maybe that's semi-transparent. Maybe they are right about that. This one is definitely opaque. That's an opaque pigment, and it says that it's transparent. I do not believe that for a second. You can see, obviously, it's not. And the reason why is when you look at the pigments. You look at the pigments, you can instantly tell, why does it look like that? So even though it says it has a 2 light fastness, but let's get into this part. So it says transparent, it's not. That's the Hansa yellow, which is fine. That's transparent. That's fine. The PY53 is the nickel, antimony, titanium, yellow rutile. Just know that when it says that nickel and titanium, you're gonna have a opaque paint. That's just what it is. You can't not have an opaque paint with those 2 colors. Okay, now this is the one I was telling you about, where I mix my own green, and then I would come back in here and add this color to it to maybe lighten it up a little bit or whatever, and it would make the green entirely opaque. So I know for a fact this is an opaque color. Even though it says it's transparent when you look at the color chart. They're lying. It's not true. And then you have my nemesis, the PG7, the phthalo green. I hate that color. And even when you mix it with all these other colors, I do not like that color. I never use that color unless I was mixing with it, which I don't do anymore because it gets opaque. So if I'm trying to put something on top of ink, I'm not going to use that color anymore. Let's move on to number 2. This is the permanent green number 2. And there you go again. Very, very opaque. Why? Because it has the same pigment in it. It has the Aralide yellow, which is the PY74, just like the permanent yellow lemon did. And then we know that it's opaque. Why? Because it has that nickel, antimony, titanium, yellow rutile. That as soon as you see titanium, the nickel titanium, you know it's going to be. It has to be. That I've never seen one that wasn't. So these two I don't use. Now, I want you to see something here. As it dries, it does get a little bit more where you can see the line, but you can definitely see the paint on top of that. I don't know if that comes through or not. Whereas if you go this way, yeah, I can see that there's a little bit of blue on top of that line, but almost none at all. So maybe that's going to be a little less over the top there, than a little less opaque than one of these. But these are completely opaque paints, and they say they're transparent. I don't know why. Now we have my most hated paint of all. Oh my goodness, look at that paint. Well, it's a pretty color. I just absolutely hate it to pieces. I would never, if they ran out of that pigment and never could use it again, I'd be a happy person. It just doesn't matter to me at all. Phthalo green is my enemy. The very good light fastness, transparent, completely transparent, absolutely. And it says only semi-staining. That's a lie. This is the most staining paint I've ever seen in my life. Matter of fact, let me see if I can show you this here. Okay, I don't know. Well, let me move this out of the way. Okay. I don't know if you can see the difference between this color and this color. Do you know why this looks like this? It's because of that paint. I mixed it in this well for a while, and that's what happened. It's this paint right here. I put it in here, and I only mixed it in there. No, that's not where I did. I also put it over here, and it stained this one. It stains everything. As a matter of fact, now that I used it, I don't know if you can see that, but it's in the bristles. Do you see the tip of the bristles? I can't get that out. That's not paint in there. See, there's no paint coming off. They stained the bristles just because I used it for that little swatch. I absolutely hate it. I'm probably going to call this the wrong name, but I have always called it Juan Brill. And that's just how it was. I don't know how to pronounce that. I say Juan Brilliant. So I've always called it Juan Brill. A very opaque paint. At least they're admitting that's opaque this time. It's good to make some pastel colors. If you mix any of these other colors with this instead of a white or something, it'll make it more like a pastel color. It's a fairly useful color. I never thought I would use it. When I looked at it, I'm like, I'm not going to use that color. It's not. I don't do like paint people or draw people at all. So I was not thinking I was going to use this. Even for a base, if you want to use any kind of skin tone, you add a little bit of red to it, or a little bit of burnt sienna or burnt umber to it, or something like that, and you can get some good skin tones with that. But I never thought I'd use it, but I use it a lot. I use it a ton. I might as well talk about the pigments now, since I was just going on about it. But it says it's only a 2 light fast. I don't know if that's true or not, but I'm guessing it is. I have no reason to not think that it is. So the PO20 is a cadmium orange. So if you're someone who doesn't like the cadmiums, don't use it. But that's what it is, cadmium orange. And then we have a cadmium yellow and a titanium white. So cadmium orange, cadmium yellow, titanium white, and that's what you get. And that's why it's so opaque, is because the cadmiums are usually opaque, and then you add the white to it and definitely make it opaque. And it's fine, but I really do enjoy that color. I like it. If you're going for like a muted tone, you can also use this. You add a little bit of darker colors to it and add more of the darker color than this, but it gives you a nice muted palette as well. It's a very useful color. I'm very happy that they included it in this set. Okay, the burnt sienna, here you go. Brown iron oxide, that's the PBR7. That was a little bit watered out, but That's fine. Don't worry about it. It's fine. It's a burnt sienna. It's a very typical formula for burnt sienna. It's some burnt siennas are more red. This one's a little bit more yellow. At least, let me get this more in the frame here. At least when I put it down here like this, it's a little bit more yellow than it is red. Some formulations are a little bit more red. It just depends on how burnt you burn the sienna. Because as you burn the pigment, it gets more and more red. Like a raw sienna looks more like this, like a yellow ochre. And as you burn it, it gets redder and redder, or darker and darker, more brown, more true brown is what I consider it, instead of like a yellow brown. But I prefer mine a little bit more red. It's very light fast. It's very transparent, not staining, and is supposed to granulate. So again, we're going to go here, and we're going to try and put a little bit more water around here and see if we can get it to granulate a little bit and show you that granulation when we come back to it. You can already see it start to granulate. It's a very granulating pigment, so that's fine. If you look at this, we go back to that cobalt blue, you're not going to be able to see this. But there's a lot of granulation right in this light area right here. I just didn't put enough pigment in there probably for it to show up. I can see it because I'm looking directly at it here, but I don't know if that's going to pick up here. There's a lot of granulation in here. Okay, let's go for burnt umber. And it uses the same pigment. It's the brown iron oxide. And it's a little bit more brown. Now, I know it's a little dark there, but it is a little, I think it's slightly, just ever so slightly opaque. I can get that brown to sit on top of that line a little bit, and it instantly granulates in this area here where there was a little bit more water put down, but I'm still going to do the same thing over here. It's a very pretty color. This is a color that I use all the time. I love this color. I like this color over the other color just because I like a more true brown color. And it obviously doesn't move, so I'm going to go ahead and add some more water, and we will add a little bit more pigment and kind of spread it around and see how it is. But this is going to granulate quite a bit. All right, let that sit for a minute. And here we have ivory black. This is bone black. That's exactly what that pigment is, bone black. Granulates extremely heavily immediately as soon as you put it down. It starts granulating. Absolutely beautiful color. However, it's more of the warm black. So anytime you have the ivory black, it's more warm. And it is from bones. That's what it's from. So if you're one of those people that you do not like that, I would not recommend that color because that's what it is. And it doesn't move. Once again, granulating. So I'm going to put some extra pigment down in here and get some granulation happening here. The Chinese white is supposed to be opaque, of course. Titanium white is opaque. And there you go. Now that's going to lighten up. Just as it dries, it'll lighten up a little bit, but I will tell you that you can use that as a gouache if you wanted to make your colors gouache-like. Mix it with that Chinese white, and it'll be like gouache, and you'll be able to do that. It's supposed to be extremely opaque, and it is. Only a 2 light fast. I wonder why. Usually that's a 3 light fast color, but they decided this one was not. Okay, let's compare a couple of these. Here's a permanent lemon yellow from, a Hansa Yellow Light from Daniel Smith. It's a little bit darker of a shade, but that's because there's different pigments in here. But this is solely a PY3. Let's see if I can get that on the screen. There you go. This is solely PY3, so it doesn't have that other areolide yellow in it, which is a little bit more tuned towards this one, which is a diareolide yellow. So it's just tuned a little bit warmer. This is more of the Hansa Yellow Light, but it's the same pigment, and it does, if you put it like this, you can see up in here, very similar to up in here, just this is a little bit warmer. Okay, let's look at the permanent yellow deep. We're going to put this next to the new gamboge. Very similar. I'd say very, very similar, except this will get a little bit more, this gets a little lighter. You can see it's some light in there. It's very close, I would say. But I think this has more of a glow to it in here, where this is just a little bit more solid orange, a little bit less of a glow. If you look at the Dialide Yellow from Core, this is from Core. I don't know why I didn't put that on there. I should do that now. Okay, so this is from Core. Now you can see that you're going to be adding more colors to this to get this a little bit darker, tuned a little bit more warm than even this one. So there's a little bit of a lighter shade. The concentrated area up in here, it's even a little bit different color orange than that is, but I don't have a PY74 to really compare that to. Now here's a direct copy to compare it to. This is the PY42 from Daniel Smith, the Mars Yellow, and I like this color better. It's a little, it's semi-transparent as well, but it's much more transparent. It sits on top of that line very, very lightly compared to this one that really covers that line pretty good. So that's more, maybe that's okay. So here's my example of something that I can say is semi-transparent, and this is semi-opaque. No, this is an opaque pigment. That's what that is, and this is semi-transparent. So that's just how it works. So the closest thing that I have to this vermilion is a flame red, which is the Rosa Gallery Flame Red. That's what it is, Rosa Gallery. It's the closest thing I have to it, but this is much more vibrant of a red than this is. This is a Daniel Smith Transparent Pyrrole Orange. It's the original formula, and it's a little bit more on the red side. It's still darker than this. I don't have anything to exactly replicate this. Even their warm red, the Pyrrole Scarlet, is much more red than this is. This is more orange. I do not have another alizarin crimson color. I don't have one. The closest that you can get to it is something like this, and I believe that Daniel Smith did a really good job in that they got the mass tone part closer to this alizarin crimson mass tone. So their anthraquinoid red, which is a PR177, it's this one here, but the mass tone red here is closer to that. Even as you get down here, this part here closely resembles that. So not anything that's watered out at all or diluted. That represents this one here. But in the mass tone, you get very close to an alizarin crimson. And I love this color. I use it all the time. It used to be my main red on my palette. It's a wonderful pigment to use, but it just does not replicate this one perfectly. Now I know this color is not in there. It's a PR264. It's not in either of these, but it gets closer. This is Daniel Smith again, Pyrrole Crimson. This is my main red now on my palette. I absolutely love this color. It's a Pyrrole Crimson, trying to be an alizarin crimson wannabe kind of thing, and it gets very close. This dark red here, this dark red, as it lightens up here, you can get that kind of mid-tone. It's close. It's not exact, but it gets as close as I've ever seen to an alizarin crimson. So if you're looking for a light fast alizarin crimson, this has a light fast of 1. It's a very light fast. It is slightly it's semi-transparent, however you want to say that, but for the most part it's transparent. Once you get out here, it's all transparent out here. It's just when it's in mass tone, it lays on top of that line a little bit. But and it's semi-staining, just like the alizarin crimson is, and it's great. It's non-granulated. It's just a beautiful color. I love that color. This is confusing to me. I don't know why they did that. Most companies go with this type of color for their violet color, their mineral violet kind of. It's a dioxazine purple, but this here is, or I say dioxazine purple, it's dioxazine violet. But that's usually the color they go for a violet. And this one is a lot lighter. It's very different. And they use a bunch of different numbers here. I don't know why. This violet is beautiful, and it can get light, and you can mix it. But This is still a very pretty color. It's a very nice color. It's just a different color. But when you go for that mineral violet, usually that's the one you see. And I thought maybe they were going for something like the amethyst and calling it a mineral violet, but this, again, this is very different than that is. That's a beautiful color, by the way. Like I said, you can see that separate out here. I don't know if you can see it on the camera or not, but the blue kind of separates in here, and then I guess the magenta color kind of separates out here. It's very pretty. It is separating. I do see granulation, but it does separate as well. So the only PB 27 that I own is the Paul Rubens, other than the Holbein color. And these are very close, both PB 27 and very close together, I guess. So that's a standard color. It kind of compares with anything else I've ever seen. I've never really used the Prussian blue except for this one. I think I have a couple of dot card samples that have a Prussian blue, but this is a beautiful Prussian blue in here. And before I said it looked almost like a phthalo. When it's wet, it does. As it dries, it gets a little bit darker, and I love this color. This color right in here is a beautiful color, and it would make me use the Prussian blue. It's hard to compare these, but if you look at this color and look at this Prussian blue here, they're very different. Now, they are in completely different papers. I want to say that. This is a pulp paper. It's a little bit smoother, a little bit less texture. This is a really good watercolor paper. This is I believe this is an Arches. Yeah, I ripped this out of the Arches book and just left it on the shelf for a while and just never used it for anything and said, you know what, I'm going to put this paint on it. I want it to be good paper so people can really see it well, and here it is. But you can see Daniel Smith Prussian blue, much more red of a color, whereas this Prussian blue leans a little bit more to the green side or neutral side, and I like that a lot more. I would say this is very close to, no, it's not really close to anything. I don't think it's really close to anything in Daniel Smith as far as this particular color, especially down here. Getting this slightly lighter color here, I love that. It's beautiful. And might I add that I am extremely happy that they added the Prussian blue instead of an ultramarine or a French ultramarine. I don't like the color. But I do like this color. This is matter of fact, I like this color more than the cobalt blue in this particular palette. But speaking of the cobalt blue, these are some cobalt blues I have here. This is the core. This is the Rosa Gallery. And I really like this blue from Core because it gets a little bit paler down here, where this one stays a little bit more to the middle side. You know, I talk about blues and say, I like the more green-leaning blues. Well, this is more of a red-leaning cobalt. This is more of a middle ground-leaning cobalt, and I like it better. This one is not bad. It's kind of in between these two. It's not bad, but I don't use it that much. That Compos blue, I don't have anything close to that, but that is a phthalo blue. I don't understand that. Not as light fast, and some of the charts say one light fastness with a phthalo blue and a titanium white. Those are light fast colors. But I do have a French cerulean blue. It's similar. It's not quite the same. I love this color. This is one of my favorite colors of blue that I've ever used. It's a Core French cerulean blue, and it granulates beautifully in here. I don't know if you can see that, but it is beautifully granulating. This is not supposed to granulate. I'm not sure if it does or not. I don't really see much. It does a little bit down here, but it's not supposed to. It's not supposed to be granulating. But then again, there's a lot of things that are supposed to be completely transparent that are opaque. So we're skipping greens. I don't have anything to compare to them because I don't like them. So we're not going to even look at that. Now, originally I was trying to compare this to something like a buff titanium, but you can see this is much more dull and tan and gold. And this is much more peach colored because of that PO20 in it. So here's a burnt sienna from Rosa Gallery. It's a little bit more of a red tone than this one. This is a little bit more of a yellow tone, but they're very similar. And I guess sometimes, just depending on the burnt sienna you get, you can go either way here. And someone's just gonna like hit me in the head, but I've never liked the regular burnt sienna color. I've always gone a different route and tried to get something different, like I've used the Pimentite Genuine, or I like the redder burnt siennas. And I believe even the Daniel Smith. Let me look at that. So this is the Daniel Smith burnt sienna, and I've never liked it. And because I use the Daniel Smith colors for so long and the paints for so long, I never liked this. I always liked either the Italian burnt sienna here, which is a little bit more brown. And if you look at, I don't know if I can get them both on the page. There we go. So it looks a little bit more like this, a little bit closer to it. And I did like this color, but I would always go for something else. I would always go for like the burnt yellow ochre. Like that color would be the color that I'd go. That's a little bit more red. Or the French, the roasted French ochre, or the burgundy red ochre, or something like that. It was just a little bit more red than that burnt sienna. And I know that's a staple on a lot of people's palettes, the burnt sienna. I just don't use it that much. It's a pretty color. I'm going to say that. It's a nice color. It's very pretty. I like it a little bit more red. That's all. Okay, I have a lot of umbers. Now, this burnt umber here from Core, very similar to this right here. Not much difference at all, especially in the mass tone up here. Very different. There's a little bit more of a gradual change here. Gets very dark and gets a little bit light. I could probably have done that with this. That's not a problem. Here's a burnt umber from Rosa Gallery. It's a little bit lighter of a shade. It's even when I concentrated, it wasn't as dark as this one is here, the Holbein. But it's still, it's a burnt umber. It's roughly the same color, or same idea of the color. Like I said, this is a lot lighter. It's more like the concentrated part is more like down here, but still it's virtually the same color. However, lately, let me show you my favorite colors. This is the brown umber from Core, and it's still that PBR 7, but it's extremely a beautiful color. There's a lot of granulation in here. The way it disperses and separates, I absolutely love it. It almost looks like there's a black pigment in there, but it's not. It's the PBR 7 only. Just absolutely beautiful. I love how dark this gets for a burnt umber. Much darker than this color, and I do like that one better. The other one that is my absolute favorite brown that I've ever used is this EF brown iron oxide. Look at the granulation, right? The whole thing granulates from top to bottom, everywhere in between. It's absolutely beautiful. Same thing. This is a PBR 6, but you can see that it spreads out and it looks like there's a little bit of dirt in it, but it's not. It's one pigment. It's just multicolored pigments, just like this one did. We're going to go through that in a second here. But this is my favorite brown to ever use, is this EF brown iron oxide. I absolutely love that color. And it's darker than this. It's more of a brown, but there's a slight red undertone in here. Or pink not red, pink undertone in here, and I absolutely love it. Now, I do not have a lot of ivory blacks for the reason that I'm not a big fan of the ivory blacks. I'm more a fan of the Mars black, which is a kind of a synthetic, natural, magnetic black iron oxide. That's what I like, because it's much cooler in tone. When you compare the two, this is a cool tone black. This is a very dark black. Lunar black is one of my favorite blacks ever. You can just paint a section this color and it looks like the surface of a moon or something. It's just beautiful. The granulation in here is beautiful. You can mix it with other colors. Some of the other colors, depending on the color, it'll make it look dirty. So I don't like to mix this with a lot of other colors. But some of the darker colors you can mix this with, and it just gives it that granulating effect. Absolutely beautiful, and definitely one of my favorite blacks compared to the ivory black, which has a little bit more of a brown undertone or a warmer undertone. I don't like that as much. Now, I do want to point out the granulation here. So you'll see that there's granulation all in here, not as strong as the other one from there, but I see it mostly in here. I don't know if it comes through there. But it does separate. The pigment kind of separates a little bit with itself. The very edges here are almost like an orange color, which is nice. That's a nice thing. And then all through here you see darker shades and gets little lighter shades and kind of a little bit of yellow on the edge over there. So it separates with itself. It's the same pigment. It's only one pigment, but it separates with itself. It did the same thing here. Look how dark that brown is and how light that brown is. This is like the more of the red brown in it, and this is more of the dark brown in it. It kind of separated with itself. And then you see a little bit of the black separation. It's only one pigment, but it separates with itself. And that's something that I really like about these two paints. This one, you can see the granulation in here, but also it kind of separates a little bit with itself. There's a little bit of a different undertone in here that I don't see in the actual paint color. So it's a very pretty color. I do use it quite a bit. I just prefer the cooler blacks. Okay, so there is the whole swatch out of the 18 colors. That took a lot longer than I thought it was going to. It's only 18 colors, but it took a while to go through all the information I wanted to go through with you. Now we're going to do a painting with them. I'm going to show you why I love these paints. I complained about these paints a lot while I was swatching them out. The colors, the opacities, all the stuff. But when it comes down to it, using this paint, I absolutely love it. It's one of the few paints that I use it for a very specific purpose. When I know that I'm going to do a certain type of painting, I want to grab these paints, and I'm going to show that to you here in just a second. All right, let's get into it. Okay, now I know that if you heard me this whole time while I was swatching these out, you think I absolutely hate these paints, that I think they're garbage, trash, you shouldn't use them, there's so many problems with them, all this other things. Here's what I want to tell you. I've kept these paints for this long because I absolutely love these paints. They are something, I use them very specifically for this type of drawing. But I do love them. Whenever you put ink down and then you put them down, they glow. There's something different about them. Even if you look at on the left side of the page, you'll see the other watercolor that I used, which I loved. By the way, I did like that one too. That was a Kuretake Paints over there. But then look at the difference in the intensity and how it's not just intensity. That's really not what it is. It's that they actually seem to have like this glowing quality, and I absolutely love that about them. So now I want to mention this too. Let me know down below when you look at this kind of a drawing, when I'm done with it, should I have put the lines in it or not? Because sometimes I do these drawings and then I put the paint in and I'm like, oh wow, that's just beautiful. And I start putting the lines in, and like the detail lines, and I think, oh, I should not have done that. I kind of ruined all the paint. It darkened it a lot. But then I sit back sometimes and I say, well, I really do like all that detail, those lines, like the patterns in them are beautiful, and I love the patterns that I put in them. So I go 50-50 on this. Sometimes I look at them, just depends on what kind of mood I'm in. Sometimes I look at them and I think they're beautiful. Sometimes I look at them and I think, I probably shouldn't, maybe I should do something else. But I just want to hear, what's your opinion when I do these kinds of drawings, I do this kind of art? Do you like seeing all the added extra lines that I put in it? Or should I just put the original lines in that I put in with the brush pen and then leave it alone? Put the paint in and then leave it alone and don't add any more detail. Let me know what you think. I'm probably not going to do whatever it is you say, but at least I know. I just want a second opinion. I want to see if what I'm thinking at the time makes sense. So just let me know if you wouldn't mind. Okay, now these paints have a lot of, like I said, they have a lot of quality issues as far as, not quality issues. They have a lot of issues concerning their quality. There are people who don't like them because of certain things. I love them. I use them all the time. Especially, these are the only paints, if you watch me paint with them, these are the only paints where I use that like one puddle of water and I just keep adding color to it and dumping it on the page. And as I do that, the colors blend so much nicer. It's like a homogeneous blend because they're all coming from the same puddle of paint with the same pigments in them. And here's another thing. I said I was going to talk about the multiple pigment thing. This is where I'm going to talk about it. When I dump that huge puddle of color and I have all these things I'm putting into them, do you know how many pigments are in that puddle of color? That's why I can't stand when people do the single pigment thing. First of all, it doesn't matter if it's a single pigment. That doesn't make it anything. It doesn't make it better. It doesn't make it more light fast. It doesn't make it pure of a mixer or anything else. Here's what you do. If you want to learn how to mix your paints, you take them and you mix them together and see what colors they create. Then you'll know how to mix the paint on your palette. Don't worry about if it's a single color or not. The whole light fast thing, if it's a light fast color and you put it on the page, it's a light fast color. It has nothing to do with if it's multiple pigments or not. That drives me absolutely insane. A lot of people say that as soon as you mix a pigment, it becomes not light fast. I don't believe that at all. I know a lot of paints that have a lot of different pigments in them, mixed pigments, and they're perfectly light fast. So that's not the issue either. And you watch how many colors I dump into that puddle. There are so many pigments in that puddle of paint, and I'm just dumping it onto the page, and it's glowing beautifully. It's not getting muddy, it's not getting destroyed, it's not getting ugly. It looks wonderful. It looks exactly the way that I want it to look. Maybe you don't agree that it looks wonderful, but at least you can say it looks the way that I want it to look. You can say that because I'm telling you, it looks exactly how I want to. So, and I use some of the colors that I really love out of this set, and I put them in there. I don't use the greens because what I do is I actually mix my own green in here. I don't use those greens. I use that warm yellow, and then I use some blues, and I mix my own greens, and that's what goes on the bottom of the page there. But I just want to say that that drives me insane when people get stuck on that single pigment thing. Look, here's what it is. This is a craft, and you know what happens with a craft? People get so stuck on things with crafts, like their skill, their craft. That's what I mean by craft, their skill. People get so hung up on things when it comes to their skill that if it's not a certain way, they have to disregard everything about it, and they get hung up on minutia. It's nonsense. It has no bearing on the end result. I've seen people create things with much less quality stuff than this, and it looks beautiful, and it lasts a while, and it's just wonderful. So don't tell me that it's just... People get stuck. I don't know what that is. It's like people that they like to come up with rules for art. Oh, I can only use paints that use single pigments. Oh, I can only use paints that look like this, or have like this, or work like this, or I can't mix them. This is the craziest one to me. These are people who say you have to use single pigment paints, and yet don't ever put the paint directly from the pan onto the page. You should dilute it first and mix it with another color first before it goes on the page. You should always mix your colors. That's what people tell me. They tell me, look, the only colors you need are a yellow, a red, and a blue. But then they tell you to only use single pigment paints. Well, guess what happens when you mix those colors together? They're no longer single pigment paints. They just destroyed their own argument. They're diluting it with water and mixing them and putting them on the page, just like I'm doing with my multiple pigment paints. And nothing is, if you have multiple pigments that are light fast, they're all wonderful, then the paint's gonna be fine. Just don't worry, it's a light fast pigment then. And I know there are a lot of people that go on about the light fast thing. It irritates the crap out of them. It really does bother them. They'll say things like nothing's ever light fast, nothing's really light fast, or whatever they hung up on. Everybody gets hung up on something. What I'm saying is, create the art you want to create. It's fine to have little things that you want to do, but don't start jumping on everybody else for what they use or what they do or how they do it. And if you want to create rules for yourself, then create them for yourself. But art is the one area where I do not put rules on myself. I have little ideas in my head. Maybe I want to try something or use something a certain way or whatever. I do it, but I don't say that's the only way it's ever going to be good. That's the only good way to use it or the only good way to do it. Do not put restrictions on yourself with your art. Allow yourself the freedom to create the things you want to create the way you want to create them. I love the way the colors just come through this ink and how they come through on this piece. I don't care how many pigments they use in their paint. I don't care at all. I don't care if they tell me that they're transparent and they're really opaque. Look at the picture. Nothing really was that opaque. It was fine. I got all the ink came through on it. And then I went over the top with more ink anyway, so it pushed it in the background even more. It's not a big deal. I want to respect your time. You hung in there. If you're still watching this video, you're in well over an hour. Well, you're in at least over an hour now. And it's going to be a couple more minutes before it's over. So I just want to say thank you for watching this all the way through and listening to me rant and rave like a lunatic. Of course, I'm never really upset or angry about anything. I've said that before. But just so you know, the thing that does bug me is when people put restrictions on other people for art. Not for art. I understand there are things in the world you need to have rules and regulations for people, for everywhere. But not for art. Don't ever give me that crap. And if you have anything to say, I'm going to pull out these people right here. They are my police force. They're going to come to your house and they're going to spit in your watercolor. You take that to the bank. Alright, so thumb up the video if you don't care what other people are doing and you don't care what kind of rules they put and restrictions they put on themselves. You're going to use the paint you want to use just because that's the paint that you like. And that's what you're going to use, and screw everybody else. Doesn't matter how many pigments there are in the paint. Doesn't matter if you're mixing them in one puddle or you're mixing them separately or you're putting them straight from the pan directly on the page. That's fine too. Alright, if you would like to join our community, go to illustrationsbypete.com. You can come in, you can put your own artwork on the site and promote it. You can find some inspiration in the free reference photos. You can just use them however you want in your artwork. You do not need to credit me. Or you can come into the forums and talk to some people and maybe give some advice and maybe find a little bit of information that helps you. So come check us out. Alright, that's about it for me. I'm going to go. I'll see you in the next one.